Mr. O'Connor. Ms. Rodriguez.
Here.
Dr. Russell.
Here.
Mr. Stengel.
Here.
Major White. Miss White.
Here. Okay, recognition of visitors.
Richard Arnold. Oh, Ernestine Crockett.
Go ahead.
Amy Kirkmeyer, board staff.
Thank you.
Paul Lewis Recovery Council and Board of Trustees, St. Paul Community Center.
Bettina Layson, board staff.
Pam Heinstein, Unison.
Okay. Welcome. All right, and the next order of business is oath of
Well,
office.
we would like to introduce Judge Puffenberger to come and do the oath of office for Miss Felicia Clark. Let me get warmed up
Gotta get all of them.
here. Sorry, I should have told you you were going to be first on. Pictures.
Ladies and gentlemen, coming over here. As I say every time, I certainly want to thank the members of the board for your service. This is important. I had the opportunity again to speak at the CIT training with the police officers. We had 44 police officers today, and it's so important. I talked to them about our involuntary commitment process and the legal issues involved with that, and there are a lot of good presentations out there for the police officers to learn about dealing with people in crisis, and it's such a good, I know Scott, you helped put that together with Robert, and such a good program. And I'm always happy when citizens are willing to come forward and volunteer their time to serve on this board because it's important. Felicia, would you please raise your right hand and repeat after me? I, Felicia Clark,
I, Lisa Clark,
do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United
and
States
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and that I will perform my duties as a member
and I will perform my duties as a member
of the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board of Lucas County
of the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board of Lucas County
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. and
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. Can we get another picture? And
Let me get both my hairs in place.
nothing personal.
All righty.
Well, let's get the family picture. You get in there too, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
many, thank you. So many of my friends here. This is a,
Yeah, you want to stick around?
I didn't know you still had Stengel.
It could be your retirement plan.
I thought Eric had replaced him with upgraded.
Good to see you too, Judge.
Thank you for what you do. Very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Sign that. Amy, sign it. Okay, we're good to go.
All right. The next thing on the agenda, can I get,
I'm sorry.
is there a motion to approve the Planning and Oversight Committee meeting minutes from February 7, 2023?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any other questions? All right. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? Okay, motion passes. All right, number 6, Jenny.
The financial statements for January start on page 9. January was one of our grant payment months, so you'll see in there in the expenses we had grant payments. And we also got our quarterly allocations from Ohio Moss in January, and they were actually budgeted in February, so we were a little bit over budget because of that. However, we came in under budget because of other reasons. In the federal revenue, we're still under budget for SOAR, mostly SOAR 2.0 year 2 underspending, so that was the one that ended in September, true underspending. And then the 2 SOAR grants that we currently have going on, the 2.0 no-cost extension and the SOS 3.0 that were supposed to start in September got a late start, and they are just now, we're getting some payments starting to flow and budgets finally getting approved by Ohio Moss. So that had a pretty late start on that, so we're showing under budget there in federal revenue. In state revenue, we're under budget mostly because of 2 grants, the multi-system adult and the addiction treatment program. And I do expect both of those to be underspent at the end of fiscal year '23. And then in the expenditures, in the grant funded program expenses, most of that $2.2 million that, so if you look at the fiscal year to date budget variance column, the 4th column over July to January, the $2.2 million, most of that is made up of the SOAR that I mentioned in the revenue underspending, and then the MSA grant that I mentioned. And then for the month of January, we had a decrease in net assets of $1.9 million. As I said, mostly because of our grant payments in January. Then I'm going to go to the balance sheet on page 10. So the biggest change in the balance sheet is just in our cash, which was our January grant payments, and then that was partially offset by receiving our quarterly allocations from Ohio Moss. And our non-designated board fund balance at the end of January decreased to $14.3 million. And there are payments on pages 11 through 13 and a motion on page 8.
Oh, okay, I thought you said you had a question, I'm sorry. All right, any questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? All right, motion.
Was there a second?
Oh, I thought there was a second. I am so sorry. I thought she-
I'll second.
Okay, I am sorry, I thought that she, okay, I am so sorry.
Can we just go and redo the motion?
Okay. All right, is there a motion to,
We have a first
we have a first
and a second.
and a second? Okay, any questions? All right, all those in favor? Aye. All right, those against, those abstaining. All right, motion passes. Again, I apologize for that.
I
All
thought
right,
for a second.
okay. All right, Phil.
Good afternoon. We can turn to page 15. And this is the agency performance report for 2022, a complete year. You'll see that there's going to also be some page numbers within the report. We'll use the bottom right, the big numbers in the bottom right-hand corner there when I'm referencing page numbers. We'll turn it to page 17 because that's where we really dive into the report here. This report is completed about twice a year. Well, it is completed twice a year, and we also look at some quarterly data internally, but we don't necessarily report out on it. So twice a year, we look at all of the data that's reported from our provider agencies in terms of the contracted programs that we have, and we just look at whether or not those programs are on track or not on track. So the first report comes out in September, and that's January through June data, and this larger report, the January through December data, comes out in March of the following year. So we'll kind of use this data as we're working through the purchasing plan coming up here in April.
So may I just so it's clear as you go on? So the first report is a 6-month period, and the second report is a year. Is 12
Correct,
months.
is the entire year.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And there is some nuances, and I'll go through that in just a moment.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no problem at all. If anybody has any questions when we go through this report, feel free to interrupt. It should be a conversation. I want to make sure that everybody understands kind of what we're going over. So this report is kind of two parts. We look at a macro level, and then we look at more of a meso level. So the macro level is the priority outcomes framework, and that begins on page 17 there. It kind of goes over the history of the priority outcomes framework, why it was made, kind of the domains in that, and then page 18 is really where the priority outcomes framework starts. So I'll just go over how this reads. We're not going to go over every single one here, but you'll see that equitable access to behavioral health services up here on page 18. That is a domain. Under that domain, there's 4 columns that you'll see under that. So indicator name, the actual, report year, and indicator descriptor. So the indicator name is the actual measure that we're looking at. So mental health providers. What does that even mean? The indicator descriptor column will kind of go into depth. So it says ratio of population of mental health providers, and it defines what providers means. The actual is the data point, so that's the second column there that you see. So you'll see 260 to 1. It's also highlighted in green. What that indicates is that that measure is improving from the prior year. You'll also see the report year, so that's when that data point was taken from. And if you kind of look down a little bit, you'll see that some of that data might look a little bit old, like 2021 or 2019 and 2020. Well, that data is taken from different sources that don't necessarily update data frequently. So it could be taken from the health assessment that's done every 3 years, so that's why that data is from 2019 or 2020. For 2021, that data is in there because 2022 data is not yet complete. So we have unintentional overdose data from Ohio Department of Health that will not get complete until probably September of this year. So when we have the half-year report later in this year, which will be in September, we'll have a lot of this data that will be updated. And I'll kind of go through that in a little bit more depth at that time.
So when you have the unintentional opioid deaths, you said that report is based upon Ohio Department of Health statistics.
Correct.
That
Yep.
is, again, once the death certificate has been issued and the cause of death has been noted on the death certificate, or?
Yeah, so the process works is the coroner's office, they input data. The Ohio Department of Health has their epidemiologists kind of go in there and look at the files and things like that. So there's a lot of parties that are involved in that, and that's why it takes 9 months. So, you know, the coroner's office will have data a lot quicker than what Ohio Department of Health has, but they have epidemiologists that kind of, you know, go in there and clean everything up to make it more uniform. Because the unintentional overdose deaths is very sticky how that's monitored per county. I can go into a lot of
Understood.
detail on that,
That's
but
the question.
yeah.
So in essence, the Ohio Department actually validates or vets the data.
Pretty much, yes. That's what their epidemiologists do. And not all coroner's offices have epidemiologists, so that's kind of the interesting part of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Page 19 is just the rest of the priority outcomes framework there. And page 20 is really when we look at the programmatic performance, so it's more the meso level data. And again, like I said, I just want to thank the providers for giving us this information in a timely manner. We've had communications if there's a misunderstanding of data to go back through and make sure that we're getting exactly what we need. So there's a lot of work that happens on their end, and we're just really appreciative of it. On page 20, it kind of explains that whole process as to, you know, what we do with that data, how we look at that data, how we even came up with the performance measures in there, as well as how we came to the conclusion whether or not things are on track or not on track. Also how we do our own quality assurance on those self-reported data points. And we can jump to page 21. And this is kind of where everything gets broken out. So you'll see up here, 83% of programs were on track at the year end. And below that graph, you'll see which line of business, that's treatment, prevention, or support services, which ones of those, you know, were closer to hitting their target. So we had treatment at 95%, prevention at 92%, and support services at 63%. Pages 21 and 22 just kind of give you an overview of what treatment, prevention, and support services mean at the board here, as well as which programs in those respective areas were not on track. And pages, starting on page 10 is Appendix A, and that's where we really get into a lot more of the program level detail. You can see all of the programs on there with whether or not that program was on track and any notes on why that program was not on track. And there's just a little disclaimer here. If you look at the far corner where it says notes on outcomes and performance measures, it does say half year there. That's been edited and it's on our website. That's not the half year. It's supposed to be year end there. So with that said, is there any questions on the Appendix A or the priority outcomes framework, or in general questions regarding this report?
Just for some of the newer board members, I'm going to ask a couple questions. When we see that an organization that we've allocated funds to not performing and whatnot, how does the staff handle that information, and what kind of conversation takes place with the provider?
So it's not, we don't have like a clear, cutoff point to, okay, you served 99 out of 100, you're not getting funding. There's a lot of conversations that go on as to, why didn't you hit that? What can we do to maybe change those measures so you're able to, hit those numbers? Do we need to right-size the program? We also look at funding, like are they able to spend all of their funds? Maybe they weren't able to spend all of their funds, so then we have to right-size the program. That's something that we do during our 120-day notice process that just happened, last month. So, it really depends on the situation, the total dollar amount of that program, the breadth of that situation. So there's, how many outcomes that program has. Do they have other outcomes? Maybe their numbers are low, but their outcomes are really well, so there's a lot of different things that we look at. So there's not like a clear answer to that. Everything's kind of like a case-by-case basis. We look at past trending data too. Has there been a history of them underperforming?
Awesome, and that you kind of answered all the questions I was going to ask.
I wish I had a more clear answer for you, but it's really, it's really case-by-case basis. So.
Well, I think the point is that everything is taken into consideration.
Right, and we do have conversations with providers, at that point too. So it's based on the conversations we have with them as well.
And the needs of the community could change, like you said. You could have great outcomes over here because that's where the need was, but we were measuring this over here. So.
And sometimes things are out of their control.
Mm-hmm.
So
like a pandemic.
Like the pandemic.
We definitely saw that. All right. And do we see in the outcomes? Are we still seeing some? This is just a macro question. Are we still seeing the effects of the pandemic with our providers? Because it just seems like everything's coming back either super fast or super slow.
It depends on the program and the line of business. For some, it's bouncing back quicker, and they're to pre-COVID numbers. Other programs are struggling a little bit more. So it just depends on the program, the population that they're serving, and what service that is.
And if I could just add to the first question that you had, the staff in the programs department do a lot of monitoring and providing support throughout the year to the providers. So the Juanita, Cynthia, and Charlotta, along with Phil, a lot of times, and many times finance, if that's necessary, to meet with the providers throughout the year, meet with the staff who are supervising those programs. We review the contract language, we talk about outcomes, and talk about what challenges they're facing, what barriers they're facing, what's working well. So there's a lot of conversation that happens throughout the year and a lot of support that's provided and offered to them also.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
You know, when I reviewed this, part of the meeting, what I saw here was a significant percentage of this in green. I focused on the items that were in red. A number of those items, the differential between what was actually accomplished versus what the goal was quite narrow, which meant they were awful close. There really were only a couple situations in here that I might have termed to be a little out of the ordinary. What I believe what that says is that that monitoring throughout, but also that that our agencies are performing incredibly well given the circumstances that we've been facing in this community the last few years.
And to your point, Mr. Stengel, that's kind of some of those programs that were marginally close or something like that, not all the programs in red were issued a 120-day notice, right? But they're ones that we have to consistently monitor to make sure that, those measures are improving. Yeah. Thank you.
This is the first time I remember seeing this report. But if you compare it to last time the report was out, are the percentages similar? And for example, treatment and prevention, which has real high numbers, was that the case last time, or do they flip-flop?
It was pretty similar last time in terms of treatment being significantly lower than prevention. Support being significantly lower than prevention or treatment. So that's kind of been a trend for, at least since I've been here, and Scott can maybe provide a little bit more information, but it's been a trend for a while.
So I also think though that our support services may have been impacted more by the pandemic than treatment agencies who stayed open during the entire pandemic. A lot of our support agencies went, either shut down or, went to virtual and had a harder time transitioning to a virtual model.
So given the integral part that support services plays to the day-to-day of our stakeholders, is that, I assume that we're doing things to focus on trying to increase the percentage of on track.
Absolutely. There's, if you notice in some of the notes here, you'll see that there are some notes in some areas that say like programmatic changes are being made for fiscal year 24. So we're in the works about maybe combining a program or measuring things differently. So there will be big changes next year. So I'm sure that number will increase, that percentage.
Thank
you. Are there any other questions for Phil? All right, thank you, Phil. Number 8, then Michael.
Thank you. I draw your attention to page 33, and this is our annual report. We are required to approve an annual report annually every year, and so we want to make sure that we do that this time around. So I'm pretty excited about this year's annual report because we were able to make some additional changes as we've been improving it over the last few years, and you'll notice in this one we have a lot more infographics and the information is more spread out so that it's easier to read. We believe it's a format that will be a little bit more user-friendly, as this will be an electronic version. We will also have this in a printed version. So if you're used to seeing our tables out in the community, very often this is what you would find on the table. Or traditionally when we went out for a levy, this may be what you may see also out during levy time, because this is the information that the public often is looking for. I would always say this is where the money was spent and give you kind of a clear idea of how we did certain things. So we have our board of directors, our executive director there. We have a letter from our executive director. We have our board staff. listed, and then you see the system of care, hopefully with all updated logos that are in place. And then it jumps right into sort of what our line of business looked like as far as crisis in 2022, which was ZEF. We launched a new crisis care service. And so we wanted to kind of highlight that as a big deal. Some of the success that we had. So this is fiscal year 2022. So just think back to that year that we went through for 2022. And so you have that with a quote from Deb Flores, and just kind of pointing out what we were able to do with the crisis care mobile outreach team, the care line. And then page 41 shows crisis by year one. And so we're kind of just putting out the numbers, 4,111 crisis care line calls. Total number of clients referred, those numbers are there and evident for you to see, but again, easy to read format, something that's there and close for you. Page 42, issue 3, right? We think back, we were doing issue 3 in May, and we closed out the year winning at the polls in issue 3. And so we wanted to make sure we demonstrated that. And at the time, we were, talking about serving that 30,958 consumers. And so when you get past that page, you see the demographics. You see youth, you see male, you see the financials, the expenses, the revenue. And it breaks down, I always think about the numbers we hear come from Jenny every so often for our budget. Well, this is kind of a snapshot at that, the expenses versus the revenue, what the totals were. And you kind of see where the differences are. And it's really the bottom of page 44 that always stands out to me and something that I've always been impressed about with our board. You see that 93% of its federal, state, and local discretionary funds to 19 nonprofit community-based agencies. And Scott always talks about how, usually we say 7% is all we keep back, so 93 cents in every dollar is actually going to services. So regardless of what that number is, right, it's the 93 cents of every dollar going to services. I think it's just so significant and something that we have here in black and white. We're transparent about it. And it's just a great opportunity for people to see really what we are about. We have a quote by Scott on the next page, and then you can see the Medicaid versus non-Medicaid. And again, it's a graph, it's in infographic form. It shows unique number of clients, payer source dollar, a percentage of clients. It's just a really, to me, neat, easy way over the next 2 pages to see that. And then we have, more information about the crisis care, Jim, Senna, and Scott. We have a great picture of CIT. So I know most of you don't get to see CIT training, and you don't always get to see the pictures we post, but this was a really great picture of one of our classes. I believe this might have been the October class. And if you were here earlier in the month, last month, well, later, when Hunter Prey came, he's down on the knee. He was our last poet that we had as part of the Black History program. And so you have a chance to see him. He was part of that. And that's exactly the event where we met him. So he was actually doing it in the event, and it worked out really well for us so that we were able to capture him. And then, of course, our equity and strategy area. We wanted to make sure we pointed out, along with a few other accomplishments, but to me it was vital that we show what we did for that year. And many of you are a part of the equity and action process we went through with Rayma. And you were on the calls, and you were a part of the workshops and the community meetings that we had. And so, yes, we have that framework on its own, but we also included here in the annual report, because it's significant portions of what we did, it's significant to the year that we had, so we made sure that was there. Closed out with something by our mayor, and then a couple of pictures from the levy, and a thank you from Scott. And if you don't have any questions or concerns, I see Scott has one.
We just had a couple of typos on page 48 that we have identified already.
Okay, so if that's it,
that must have got away from us.
Yes, and it could have definitely had to. I will take a look at the. Yeah, I see it. Yep.
It's why we vet it.
Yep. You're on 46. Page 46. No, I may have to refer to field. Page 46. Yeah, just the initials. I didn't see them highlighted elsewhere what they mean.
Oh,
Oh. I-
Yeah, so,
It's right above it, but it's hard to follow because it's not. The CPAS, are you talking about CPAS?
no, gosh, and.
MCD, MCD, and,
Right. Great Office Solutions Helper.
Yeah.
Right, so that's basically clients that we pay for, and then the Medicaid would be obviously those that we do not pay for. So we get extracts for that.
So GOSH is our internal billing system, and NITS is the state Medicaid billing system.
yeah, actually more. So the non would be non-Medicaid, and then it should be, MCD it should be Medicaid and non-Medicaid.
Okay.
Yeah, and then AOD, you know, alcohol and other drugs versus mental health.
Got it.
Okay.
That's a good-
Yeah, it would make a little bit more simple for those who don't deal with it every day, yeah. Any other questions at all? If not, there is a motion for your consideration, I believe on page 32. Yes, page 32.
Michael, what are you planning on, again, publishing?
After the next meeting, when it is approved and we have it all cleaned up, we'll go to publish. It'll be on the site that day.
On the website?
On the website, we'll go to Facebook, and then we'll go to having it printed.
Is there a motion?
I move for the acceptance of the report. Well
Second.
done.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? All right, motion passes. All right.
You know, Dr. Carter, real quick, I just want to tell you, thank you for all the work that went into this. A lot of work goes into the annual report, so I've had to put a few of them together over the years, and the way that it's laid out, it's easy to read. The community will really be able to follow what we've done and where their dollars have gone, which is really the important part, right? Is that the taxpayers understand.
Thank you, that was definitely a team effort.
Oh, team effort.
Definitely team effort. Our
Well,
entire
thank you to
team
the
did
whole
it.
team.
And I would say, one of the times when you talk about reading a book or reading anything that it has to get you from the very beginning. And what we did up front was to talk about what was so important, which was what we did with crisis services, followed by, thanking the community on the success of the levy. So I think how that starts out with everything else that follows, I think is really, really important. And I think it's laid out really well. Thank you.
All right, Amy.
Hi, everyone. We're on the last page, page 55 in the packet, health officer designations. We don't have any new designations this month, but we do have 5 renewals who are listed there in the middle of the page on 55, and a motion for you to consider.
So moved.
Second. Are there any questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? All right, motion passes.
This is so exciting.
Thank you very much. See if I can make that a little larger for folks. See, how do I get rid of that? How do I get rid of this? Anybody know? I don't know how to get rid of that.
I call this, yeah.
Like triangle, click on that. Right in the middle. No, on the side.
Here?
No, on the side, right there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you go. Thank you, thank you.
I already saw this.
Okay, so I'm going to take a few moments to talk a little bit about Danny's Place. You guys have been hearing Danny's Place off and on for the last, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years. We've been planning this for quite a while. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Danny's Place represents an adult psychiatric rehab facility similar to what you might envision as a assisted living. Once you enter a hospital for a certain condition, you step down into assisted living facility before you go home if your condition warrants that. Well, oddly enough, that service does not exist in the mental health population, in the psychiatric system. Until one program started about 4 years ago called the Adam and Amanda House down in Athens, Ohio. Since that time, we've been working towards creating the second facility. We have identified some funding. We've identified a location. We've identified an owner's rep. We have an architect and engineer. We are on pace to secure additional funding. And we are moving towards zoning and planning conversations and selection of a construction manager. So what I'm going to show you today is I'm going to kind of go over the latest version. This is what is going to be used for fundraising, private fundraising event that we will have on May 1st. And you can see that this was updated on March 1st for use for that service. And so I'm going to just kind of roll through some of this stuff. And David, I think I hope you're impressed with some of the advancements we've made since the selection of the owner's rep. David was instrumental in helping us move forward on this. So we are talking about a site that is directly behind the Northwest Ohio Psychiatric Hospital, NOPH. So if you walked out NOPH's back door, you would hit this site. Think of it here, this is Arlington. Detroit is over here. The hospital is over this way. The Armory is right over here. So that kind of gives you some orientation. Bowser High School is there. I'll talk a little bit about some of the complications of that later. But this is, at first glance, is a fairly busy slide, right? There's a lot going on here. But what I'm just showing you here is, it shows mature trees. It shows, these are residential wings. This is treatment side with more treatment, and then the rest of this here is living. We envision this facility not only being a residential facility that has on-site treatment, but also for those who go through the facility would have the ability to stay and receive outpatient treatment services there for continuity of care. So we have...
Did you say stay and receive?
They'll be able to continue to receive treatment services there, not reside there.
Okay.
Right. The idea is up to 90 days of post-state hospital care. And then those individuals would also be able to step back into the facility if they needed, and even step back into the hospital if needed. So we're trying to create a mechanism where the individual's condition dictates the lowest level of care necessary for them to succeed in our community. So, so we have ample space for outpatient services and the obligatory fire circle. Evidently, you have to have a circle for egress and of safety forces, and then you have staff and client resident entrance on this side here. And you'll get to see that a little bit more as we move down. This is maybe a better visualization of the actual facility itself. You can see Arlington clearly. Still can't see Detroit because this is behind the hospital here, but that is a what do they call that thing in the middle? Courtyard. There you go. Courtyard. This model is now on about 3.5 acres, down from about 4 1/4 a couple of weeks ago. And the reason is because we're actually starting our surveying and sonaring the ground, and we've found some unidentified cabling here and some easements for sewer and water that were previously undocumented. Good things we didn't punch holes in the ground, right? So we're trying to figure that stuff out. So this is probably your first look at what we believe the exterior will look like. While the final color palette and outdoor type, or the external finishings are not finalized yet, the angles of the roof, the structure here to hide the roof-mounted HVAC, the overhangs. This would be that walkway from the parking lot. We do envision this being fairly representative of the area as far as natural grasses, natural flowers, uncut in many of the areas to blend in with the environment that's already there. This is another way, this is the main entrance, and I'd just point out that you can see that's the administrative wing there, and this would be the area where residents would be able to congregate. So it would be actually shielded from Arlington. So they would have a lot of privacy, as well as the privacy that the mature shrubbery and trees would eventually create, to create that home-like setting. And yes, there is a dog there, right? One of my requirements is that we have some kind of support animal on site. So that gives you a good look of how it might look like. And then this is, I think, what tells you a little more about what's happening here. So let's start in the center. That's the courtyard. The yellow areas are the free living space, right? Access 24/7. The blue areas are residential wings. Gray areas are restrooms. We'll have a tub and a roll-in shower, and then a single restroom in each area. So there'll be restroom, that'll be a roll-in shower, this would be a tub, and that would be just like a single stall restroom. If you count the numbers, you're seeing that is actually 18. Maximum residency is 16, but we're building 18 rooms in case a room goes down because of plumbing issues or transition and we can't turn a room over. We want to be able to hold the capacity as high as 16 for as long as we can. That will dramatically improve operational revenue through Medicaid billing and POS billing and potential residential state supplement and other types of billing. So those wings are also spread apart enough so that you really won't be able to look into each other's windows with any great certainty. There won't be room in here to hang out. There'll be fire doors at the ends, but it won't be expected that you'll be able to access those on the ends. All outside activity will be here. And then we have group rooms here. We have a workout facility here. We have what we're considering Serenity room here as well. And then we're setting this room up for art therapy and group therapy with a dividing wall, and then a large group room here, group supply room, restrooms, and then your counselor and doc, administration, site director, whatever. And you have also med room and other supply areas. Client entrance here, like I said, we have bed bug remediation room right here, and then there's laundry facilities in this area. This is a garage for storage. And this is also client storage. You know, we envision areas where individuals can lock up their personal belongings for securing them for when they're that they can take with them to move out, or don't necessarily need to be in their actual rooms.
Before you leave that slide, what are you doing about food service?
So, thank you. Kitchen, right there. And we envision it to be a teaching kitchen. So it's wide open. There'll be ample space for small groups to sit around and learn how to prepare meals, how to serve meals, also participate in the cleanup of the facility, the cleanup of the kitchen area, and then, you know, they'll be able to eat together, or they'll be able to separate a little bit more. These are all open entertainment areas.
To give me a better orientation, where's the entrance?
The entrance for clients is here, residents and staff. The entrance for any outpatient services and visitors will likely be there. So if you're coming in for an outpatient service, you would come in here and then you would disperse to a group room or to see a clinician, but you would not go past this area because this is somebody's home.
Okay.
So you wouldn't just invite people to come into your home, right? So that's what we're thinking about with that. That's just a little bit cleaned up, gives you the idea of what these items are.
Is this a locked facility?
It will not be a locked facility. And that's just more of the same, gives you an idea of resident entry, living, bedrooms, support, patio. This will be a covered patio as well. And a lot of things that I've already discussed.
So Scott, where are the staff?
So staff areas, let me see if this was a better one. Staff areas for clinical work would be here, but depending upon the staffing levels, 24/7, we would anticipate that the staff would be intermingling amongst the group. So there would, we keep going back and forth on should we have a workstation or work center or something. Now obviously there will be cameras and security and all that will have to be monitored. But we believe that the best use of staff during the 24/7 is modeling the behaviors we expect the residents to be, helping people manage behaviors, interacting in between the interacting with the residents, and of course monitoring, you know, what the comings and goings of the folks. So as far as staffing levels and all that, we're still not there yet. We're still working on all that. A provider has not been selected. A method for selecting the provider has not been selected yet. We have 2 years out. So if we are lucky enough to receive some funding that I hope we're getting along with our fundraising crew, there's a strong possibility that we can put shovels in the ground in September. If we can put shovels in the ground in September, the time frame is 18 months from there to build, give or take a winter or two, and then occupancy sometime after that period of time.
What's the size of the residential spaces?
Good question. Don't know off the top of my head, but they're bigger than zone requirements. So I think zoning is 150 square. They're bigger. I got a good picture of one I'll show you in a second here. So this is just kind of like a 3D rendering of what that would look like.
Hey Scott, so staff that will be working in the living area, they'll be modeling living in the living area, but will they have a place where they go?
Yeah, they'll have a place to go, but we don't want them to stay there.
Right.
We want them interacting. And we learned that through, we've done a couple of different visits to similar type programs. One in Ohio, one in Indiana, or no, actually they're both in Ohio. One was in Dayton, the other was in Athens. And we talked to the folks about, what do you want? What do you need? If you could do something different, what would that look like? And then we had focus groups with NOPH patients. And we have actually had 2, and we said, okay, what do you like about this place? What do you don't like? What would you like to see as your next journey out? What do you think these things should look like? What kind of extracurriculars? What kind of programming? What kind of security? We've had a lot of those conversations. And we're also now scheduling to go back to them and present this and say, okay, now that we're here, this is what we're doing. Now talk to us about what you see and what you don't like and what you like, so we can make some modest modifications. There's a room. It's not a. It's a full bed. It's not a single, as you might expect. There's room for a table and chair. This circle represents the turning radius of somebody who is in a wheelchair. That all rooms will be ADA compliant. They'll have ample storage here, plus, as I mentioned, there'll be ample storage in a side locked area. We're still working out security measures for rooms and stuff like that. We haven't quite figured that. Are we going to key card it? Are we going to, what's that going to look like? So we're still kind of talking about all that yet. We're not quite there. But we have underbed storage. We're settling in on what the blinds look like and what ligature risks might be represented, so we can reduce the potential of any hanging issues or any other security or safety issues that might be concerned. Very likely the doors will be those dual swing doors, so that, they're, what are they called, the jams that are...
Jack and Jill door?
Pardon me?
Like a Jack and Jill door?
No, yeah, it'll open in and will allow to be open out if they're in an emergency. So they're pretty cool, actually.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, absolutely.
Since there are no bathroom facilities in each individual room, how accessible, particularly for ADA purposes, the restrooms are in relation to them?
So the gray areas here represent restrooms. Here, there, there. And then there's 2 here, there's 2 here. All of these will be ADA accessible. There will be one in each wing that has a roll-in shower. So you'll be able to roll right into the shower if you need to. The other will have a bathtub. And that is direct conversations with clients, residents saying they would like to see a bathtub in these areas. It helps them with stress reduction, and they see a lot of benefit to that. Both men and women.
Each bathroom, each shower area is designed to be individual. There's no group anything.
Correct.
For the rooms that have the tub, I think, respect the recommendation from the folks who gave it. Would it, just practically speaking, would it make sense to have a shower in there as well? So when a tap uses a tub, you can have 2 people showering at the same time? I'm just thinking of practicals in the morning, like people getting ready for the day.
Let me check to see if it was a tub shower combination. Let me see that. The conversations we had around restrooms in the state hospital were, they preferred private over mixed. And it was mainly a lot to do with cleanliness. Certain people, they wanted their things, they wanted to maintain that cleanliness, and sharing it wasn't as wasn't favorable in some cases. So we tried to strike a healthy balance. They didn't mind sharing with 1 or 2 people. They didn't want to share it with 5 or 6. So they didn't want that dormitory style, So So we worked through a number of different processes. One of them was, what does the restroom in every room look like? Well, we don't have enough money to do a restroom in every room. So we got, I think we're down to 3 to 1, 3 people to 1 room, which is pretty reasonable, right? And being able to account for specialized populations, LGBTQ, if the population gets heavy male and there's only a few females in there, how do we segregate that out, and how do we want to manage the population? We really want to keep gender as separated as possible. Now during the day they will commingle like they do now in the state hospital, but the evidence of clinical work that I'm familiar with would suggest that we want to keep genders separated during treatment services.
Especially if you want it to be trauma informed.
Exactly. Thank you for that. So that's an overview of the bedrooms, and then you can see an overview of the wings. Gives you an idea of the, that looks like the roll-in shower and the bathtub here. You can see single stalls, and then this is just like a half bath kind of thing.
Will there be toilets in the shower rooms as well?
Yeah, they're right here.
Okay. Cool.
And then that's just other stuff. So this is the latest information. I wanted to make sure that you all saw it because it's coming. It's coming. I mean, we're going to be here before you know it. Hopefully, everybody in hard hats with a shovel in their hand, turning up some dirt. So as far as funding goes, wanted to talk a little bit about that real quick. The facility now is about 21,000 square foot. And we haven't went through should we squeeze this yet? We haven't actually had to do that yet. And we hope we don't have to. But as far as actual funding is concerned. So Marcy Captor secured us $2 million in federal funds. We allocated $500,000. And thank you. We also have access to the Ohio Moss Capital Grant for this facility of $750,000. So that puts us at about 3.25 mil. So we need 6.7-ish. The Ohio State Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services will very shortly inform our regional board collaborative of the parameters on how we may spend up to $7.5 million in this region to create one or more of these facilities. So there is a very real opportunity to receive upwards of $6 million, maybe more, depending upon what my peers' plans might be. Now, the regional boards, and by the way, I should say that this is for the region, so it's not just for Lucas County. Although we're driving the development, the state funds will require, and I think we want to be good partners in allowing access for people outside of Lucas County, because, I mean, quite frankly, they're in Lucas County anyway. And so we want to help stabilize and then hopefully help move them to their home communities where they can gather the support they need to maintain their recovery. So over the next couple weeks, we will have a better understanding of what any state funding might look like. I'm certain we're going to get a a very large chunk. I can't tell you exactly what that looks like. Also on May 1st, the fundraising committee, of which Senna and Jim are part of that committee, along with NAMI Ohio and others. I should mention this first and foremost. Jeff and Donna Heck, whose daughter Danny, this place is named after, will lead our fundraising efforts. And their goal is to raise $1,133,000. If they reach that goal, with us getting about $6 million from the state and all the other money I referenced, we're about $10,250,000-ish or so. That's enough to put a shovel in the ground. We don't have cost estimates yet. That won't come until construction management can get on it. But
we have estimates, right, about what it's going to be.
Well, we have wild guesses based on about $450 a square foot. Now that isn't too bad. Now pre-pandemic, that would have been great. We would have built the Taj Mahal. Post-pandemic, with the supply chain issues and the escalation in costs, every month you wait, things are going up. So, so we're hopeful that we can do that. We think this plan, as it is right now, represents a quality facility that we all would be proud to have. So, so yeah, we're there. We're getting there. So, any other questions?
Nice presentation.
I have one. I think you briefly mentioned, I suppose I was going to ask the name. What is the significance behind
So,
that?
Jeff and Donna Heck are from Ashland. They were brought to us by NAMI Ohio. They're on the NAMI Ohio board. They're parents of a daughter who completed suicide approximately 7 years ago, while she was at the top of her game as far as the CEO of a company. She was 33 years old. That's important to reference because immediately thereafter, Jeff and Donna started a foundation, 33 Forever. The $133,000 that's attached to the million is Jeff and Donna's contribution through their 33 Forever Foundation for this project. So they have been a part of our conversation from the beginning. They were brought to us because their story, and you'll hear their story. We'll get them here so you can hear their story. I'm sure is like many stories, unfortunately. But what they've recognized after the passing of Danny was that if there would have been a step-down facility, a rehab facility of sorts that she could have went to, they felt that that might have changed things for them. So they independently had this idea, and we had this momentum, and NAMI Ohio brought us together to help realize their dream and ours.
This is great. A great marriage.
Yeah. So they're having input on design, they're having materials, layout. They're with us every step of the way. They're in our construction meetings, they're in our fundraising meetings, they're engaged 100%. Senna and Jim met them. If you have any, if you guys would like to make any.
Thank you, Scott, because I was going to add this. In our meeting, and Jim, please chime in. I'm trying not to be emotional. Their commitment is so real that you can almost reach out and touch it. And it's from a space of being a parent who lost a child, right? And we all know with that, the hardship of that. And so their passion is something that is extraordinary. What's really extraordinary, necessarily not their passion, but their action to move forward, to raise the money, to be a part of it, and to make it real. And so, as Scott mentioned, our board, identified that this needs to happen in our community. We allocated funds for it, we did all this work, and all of a sudden, it's like the universe brought us all together, their level of contacts, like, I believe this is so real because of their level of contacts and their commitment and their willingness to stretch out and dig deep themselves and whatnot. It was an amazing couple of hours to, they're very much like each and every one of us. Each of us have been touched on some level. And just the thought that there could be a facility and that this incredible couple have come forward and said, you know what, here's our $133,000, let's do this, let's get this real. I mean, that to me is pretty powerful.
And NAMI's $2 million that they brought to the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I want to also mention that we are having conversations about how do we reflect all of us in this facility. So, how do we represent the community we serve? So it's not just Danny's portrait on a wall mural or something, but it's everybody. People from Lucas County, people with money and people without money that has a name to put, or has the ability to put a name on a plaque for a wall because of their experiences. Those are the kinds of conversations we're having right now.
Very inclusive.
It's the story is very powerful. Their commitment is unbelievable, but it's very humbling. All right, when you really hear them talk. All right, the emotion of what they've experienced and how that has motivated them to do and to help be a part of this. The fact that this has come together from all these different sources to this point in time where we are right now is a blessing. It's going to be a blessing for this region and this community. And I'm very optimistic that we won't have any issues with fundraising here with what we're doing. But you will thoroughly enjoy them and thoroughly, the story is incredibly powerful and touching. But this isn't about their ego. This is about literally trying to create something that would be there for someone else that wouldn't have that be the situation for that family that it was for theirs. So.
Anything else?
Is $450 a square and all in cost?
Yeah, that's what we're hoping.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I mean, it's soft costs and FFE and everything.
So, yeah, if in our heads, we had a 10 mil number. At 21,000 square feet, 450 is right at about 9.5 mil, somewhere right in that category. So there's a little bit of movement one way or another, and of course, we're trying to overshoot our 10 mil number. And that's, if we get the 6 mil, and confident we'll do the 1.3 or 1.133 number, that's without pulling anything else out of our budget other than operations, which I might be able to cover a good portion of that somewhere else for a couple of years that we're trying to work on right now. So there'll be some, between now and then, there'll be a lot of wheeling and dealing with my peers on what we need and how we need it and what benefits there are to them. And so there's a lot of these discussions that are going on. And then as soon as we secure that, we'll sign our long-term contract or phase 2 contract with the architects and engineers, because we haven't signed that yet. And then we'll select construction management, then we'll be able to get true costs, or at least estimated costs, then they'll bid out for true costs. And now's a good time to make sure everybody understands we do have a project labor agreement attached to this project. And all of our contracts downstream from the architect will include project labor agreements for supporting our organized organizations.
So that's gonna be a county-owned and controlled,
Good question.
or a state-owned and controlled?
So, if you build on state land, the state owns the facility. So they will own the facility. We are working out lease conversations right now. Maximum lease of 15 years from point of signing, with the inclusion of an additional 15-year potential. And the reason we say that is because they can't, David and I went round and round with them on this one. We wanted longer, but since it is on state land, they will own the facility. And honestly, if they put $7 million into the project, like they very well could be, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. We'll select the vendor to run the project and provide the necessary operational expenses, plus offsets of Medicaid and residential state supplement and other funding as it becomes available. And you know, the regional boards, if they have a client that will stay there, they'll pay their share too.
Scott, with the, say the vendor, you mean provider that would? Like,
Yeah, that's, yeah, the provider.
Would our budget include like the infrastructure for like EMR and all those sorts of things, so that it doesn't, like if there was to be a new vendor at some point, there's not like this need to like cross?
So we're not quite there yet. I mean, you gotta have an electronic medical
Yeah.
record, right? So if you have a new vendor, it's unlikely that they won't already have an EMR. I mean, you can't really survive in this world right now without an EMR. You have to be able to bill Medicaid, right? So they're gonna have an electronic medical record. What the expense is to extend that into there and maybe manipulate it and stuff to get us the information that we want, that'll probably be built in startup costs and long-term and the budget, just like it is with any of our other projects. You know, that's part of that administrative fee kind of thing that gets up. So, but we're not nearly there yet as far as total expenses, you know. I think at one point we would see a 16-bed unit cost about $2 million to operate. That was pre-pandemic. I'm not sure what it is now with the escalation in staffing costs and, you know, the ancillaries.
Yeah, and you can't even begin to estimate that or figure that out, because recruiting and staffing alone, it has changed dramatically since the pandemic.
So will they be state employees?
No.
They won't?
No,
Okay.
they will not be state employees. We will lease the land that the building is on. The board will fund it, and it will be operated by a certified Ohio Moss provider. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that we won't benefit, that facility won't benefit from some of the operations that are already existing on site. For instance, we're already in conversation about outside security. Because it's on state land, the state has their own police department, they already patrol the area. That will help with some security issues. They may have extra capacity for psychiatrists and psychologists that we might want to take advantage of. So there'd be tremendous benefit that if you had the same psychiatrist that was serving somebody in the state hospital, follow that person down into the step down, and then also be able to provide some outpatient support to that individual, or the psychologist, or whatever that might be. So there's some opportunities it might be food service. It might be, we don't know quite yet, we're not quite there yet.
You should be able to get some economies of scale by code, ordering things with the state hospital.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at this point, but those conversations are coming. It's part of our contract with TBD Solutions to help us kind of identify the parameters of a selection process, what staffing might look like, what a potential budget might look like, what evidence-based models we might want, what training for all levels of staff would be appropriate, and identify some of those things so that we're lining this stuff up, because we know that probably 4, 5, 6 months before the thing opens, we're gonna have to start bringing staff on and training up so that we can open up. And so there'll be a ramp-up period that we'll have to deal with as well.
Scott, earlier you were referring to your peers, and for our newer board members, could you tell us who those peers are?
Oh, yes, I can tell you, sure. So for the newer board members, and for those of us who forget from time to time, the state hospital system is broken down into 6 regions. They're called state hospital regions. We are in the Northwest Ohio Psychiatric Hospital region. 23 counties in the Northwest Ohio region, and it goes a lot south than you think, refer patients into the Northwest Ohio Psychiatric Hospital here on Detroit. So that's the 23 counties. There's 11 boards that make up the 23 county region. Hancock, Wood, 4 county off to the east of us, west of us. Seneca, Sandusky, Ottawa, Wyandotte, Huron, Erie. Down south, you have Miami Dark Shelby, Allen Allglaze Hardin, and I'm forgetting somebody.
Putnam.
Putnam, thank you, Putnam.
Both said it.
So we meet regularly as a collaborative. I actually lead the collaborative and have for years, to talk about these types of things and to share ideas, share programming, share problem solving, co-fund models when it's appropriate, advocate on behalf of the region, and meet with our state associations or providers, and we do that routinely. There's probably not a week that I don't go by and talk to at least one of the other board directors about collaborative programming in some way, shape, or form. And the fact that the state hospital is here really kind of forces that discussion, because what happens is their patients, their residents become patients here, and we're eyes on the ground. Our partners in our community sometimes will serve those patients because they won't have facilities to return home, and they'll end up on our ACT teams or in our adult care facilities, or both, or use our crisis system. They also use our private hospital beds, and I say ours, I mean in Lucas counties, because we have a great number of private psychiatric unit beds here compared to others. So there's always opportunity to continuously converse with other directors on the goings-on of the boards. So.
I thank you for sharing this. I just think it's important for some of the newer board members to understand that, our service here is Lucas County, but our impact is great. And thanks for your leadership amongst those peers.
That's all I have.
All right. Paul? There's no other questions. Let's get to open session. Richard?
Just a couple of items. Would the minutes of this meeting reflect a very pivotal moment in the board's history? It was 50 years ago that the Ruth I Center opened. That would have been March of 1973. It came out of a group called Concerned Citizens for Mental Health. They held their annual meeting on February the 22nd, 1973. Jeff Hunter announced that they would be getting a new center in the next month. couldn't find the date it actually opened, but I did find the allocations for this board for that month, and it was, they allocated $147,000. They said this is the first of what will be 4 community mental health centers. Jack Hunter became the executive director. They were located at 1510 Elm Street. They had 10 employees, 9 full-time and 1 part-time. Remember, this board was built, it was created in '68, but you couldn't get property taxes passed. The state was doing money, so it was very slow going. But this was the start of what this board was formed for, getting people out of the state hospital. So this month is the 50th anniversary of the creation of the Ruth Eye Center, which today is known as Unison. As for what's going on over at Government Center this morning at County Commissioners, excellent presentation by Scott and Zeph Center on their gambling awareness program. It's a problem now, it'll be a bigger problem in the near future, and they gave a resolution to them and talked about what their plans are. They also talked about Harbor will continue to be the employee assistance program for the county. Last year they had problems, said we're going to contract with you month to month until we find other vendors. They couldn't. So they've met with Harbor, and I understand they've worked out their problems and come to a price agreement. So Harbor will continue to be the employee assistance program for both county and the city of Toledo. As we speak at City Council, they are purchasing more shotguns. They purchased $140,000 in grant money, and this afternoon they'll take $47,000 from their general fund. Very interesting discussion they had. They have to replace their shotguns. They're more than 20 years old, and they've got replacement parts. In 2019, our mayor attended a group in Washington, D.C., and he put forth a very creative idea that we've got purchasing power. And we purchase lots and lots and lots of guns for our police department, so how about if we use that purchasing power to try and force the gun companies to not sell assault rifles to civilians? It never took off. But what he wanted was that we wouldn't buy your guns if you're selling assault weapons to the general public. So they're going with Benelli. You can't find any gun manufacturer that can make that claim. So that's who they're going with. They are assured that these old shotguns will not be up on the streets of Toledo. They'll be disassembled by the manufacturer and used for replacement parts, but they will not come back to Toledo. But we absolutely have to replace our aging shotguns more than 20 years old. And let's see, the more I read about mental illness these days, the more angry I get. If you look at the front page of the Detroit News, you'll see another gun poll, and they're saying, yes, let's enact gun legislation. This is in response to the shootings at Michigan State University. The other front page, court mental exams, they keep rising. People are sitting in jail waiting for a court-ordered exam. Can't find it. If you turn to page 5, you'll see there was a man, 33 years old, long history of mental illness, walked into the Dearborn Police Department just before Christmas and aimed his gun, tried to shoot police officers, the gun jammed. They shot him fatally. Now his family are suing for $10 million, saying you didn't do enough to de-escalate. If you look at the front page of today's USA Today, this is because of Senator Fetterman. Lawmakers share stories of mental health, and it talks on and on about stigma, and you almost think stigma is like a recent development. Indulge me for a moment as I talk about stigma. This board responded in 1988 when the state legislature passed the Mental Health Act of '88. It was a 10-year implementation plan to take people out of the state hospital and take those millions and millions of dollars and put them into community boards like this one so we could create Werner Center, NPI, and fund all of our community mental health centers. We had a perfect storm come together. Here's the perfect storm. First, you had the Jeffrey Dahmer case. This is the guy that was engaging in cannibalism in Milwaukee. He grew up just down the road in Akron. 30 years later, they're still writing books about this guy. In addition to that, you had the Joseph Ansman case. This was a man that attacked women in Toledo. They know he attacked 3, murdering 1. They caught him, gave a full confession, but was found to be not guilty of reason of insanity. Now, they shipped him off to Dayton Forensic, but every time he had a court appearance, the Toledo Blade covered it. Whenever he got his grounds privilege, he'd walk around the grounds. No, they covered that. Whenever he got his off-grounds privilege, they covered that, and they would go into great detail about his crime. And if that's not bad enough, really bad time, I know you remember this, the biggest movie of 1991 was Silence of the Lambs. The story of Hannibal the Hannibal Lecter. It was a New York Times bestseller by James Harris. made millions at the box office, at the Academy Awards. It won everything, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Key. What this perfect storm meant here in Toledo, Ohio, was when people like myself and Norma Lucia and John Brandenberry and Griffiths, when we were out doing public speaking, yeah, we had to answer questions. Are people with mental illness cannibals? We had to be polite. Remember, these are voters. No, they're not cannibals. No, they're not eating people. They're just nice people with a disability. They live in the state hospital because there's no place else for them to live, but we're trying to change that. So people, I hear people talk about stigma today, and it's so terrible. Well, it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. Here is my point. Next year, you have a levy that is coming up for real. You can, if this board decides to, ask for a new millage. If you do, I think the selling point should be public safety. We know that mental illness and gun violence, they're tied together. There's no way to pull them apart. It's probably going to be discussed next year during the presidential campaign. So this board, if you do ask for extra millage, that should be your selling point. Public safety. We fund programs now that prevent violence. In the future, if we have more funding, we can create, expand and create new programs to make sure that people get the help they need before they deteriorate to the point that they pick up a gun and start shooting people. That should probably be your focus next year as you ask for either new millage or existing millage. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for those of you who'd like to see the proclamation, it's sitting over there on the table.
It's quite lovely.
Anyone else for open session? Anybody else have anything? All right, if not, this meeting is adjourned.